Hello, my name is Brenda Mata, and welcome to the Fearless Calling podcast. This is a podcast where we focus on encouraging Christian women of all ages to fearlessly pursue their God-given calling. Today, our special guest is my mama, Brenda Mata. I asked her to be on the podcast today to talk about mother-child relationships and the importance of children having a safe space in the home. I'm excited for us to share with you all today and how as Christians we can laugh without fear of the future because of God's grace in our lives. Today we are doing things a bit differently and are doing a video podcast so our viewers actually get to see the people behind the voices. So Mama, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Well, Brenda, thank you for asking me to come. I just appreciate any time I get to have with you, and thank you.
Yeah, of course. So I'm going to go ahead and go into our questions. Today, like I've already mentioned previously, we're talking about the importance of mother-child relationships and the importance of children having a safe space in the home, which a lot of people will hear this and think, well, I'm obviously a safe space for my children. But they don't really realize that there's a lot more there's a lot that goes into making a home safe for your children than just being a parent. And that's something that I've always appreciated with you. And the reason I really wanted to do a podcast on this specific topic was because you and I are constantly having people come up to us just saying how different our relationship is to other mother-daughter relationships or even just mother-child relationships.
Yes.
I've had friends, I've had acquaintances come and talk to us, and then people at church, people at school. And it just honestly surprises me every time someone points out how close we are, because to me, like, it's normal and I don't feel like this type of relationship is uncommon. But when I interact with my peers, they make it sound like it is uncommon. And it's honestly kind of crazy to me. So I want to ask my first question, which is, why do you think our relationship is so abnormal?
Well, I'm probably going to have a little trouble answering that question because to me, it doesn't feel abnormal.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's very natural for us.
Yeah.
But also, if I think back to my relationship with my mother, it's actually totally opposite. And that in itself is one reason why it was very important for me to make sure that any children that I interact with, I make sure they know that they have a safe space with me. And it's not just physically safe. You're emotionally safe and just able to talk about anything at any time. Mm-hmm. So that to me is just so very important because it's so opposite of the way I grew up.
Yeah. And you always did such a good job of this because John and I have talked about it for years. And, it's still something that I think, you implemented so many things that made it easy for us as kids to come to you, that as adults, we were like, no matter what we do, we can still come to you. So even though I'm an adult and I can make big boy, big girl decisions, I still want to have a conversation with you and say, hey, this is how I'm feeling about it. And you raised me this way, but I'm starting to believe this, or you raised me this way and I fell away and I feel horrible and I just need someone to talk to about it. And you were always so good at that. And that kind of leads into our next question of, in what ways did you make sure to open that door for us to come to you? Because our viewers may not really understand what our podcast necessarily is about, because like I said, like, it's so different than just being a parent. Like, being a parent, not necessarily anyone can have kids, but a lot of people can have children, and they don't realize that it's not just getting pregnant and giving birth and feeding and taking the child to school and getting them a good education. There's so much that goes into that. So can you maybe speak a little bit into what ways, like I said, what ways you made sure to open that door for us, but also what is different that we need to, parents and future parents need to be aware of opening that door? What door do they need to open?
Well, it's communication.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems like a simple answer, and honestly it is, but that is honestly what the main problem is with a lot of relationships is communication. Mm-hmm. Whether it's a mother-daughter, mother-son, father-daughter, father-son, or even in a marriage.
Yeah.
Just people need to learn to communicate. But in order to do that, you have to have someone who is willing to look at you and say, I'm not going to judge you. It is not my place to judge you. That is God's job. My job is to love you.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing you say, nothing you do, nothing you think is going to make me ever stop loving you.
Yeah.
And that, I think once a child understands that, they know that they are in a safe place.
Yeah.
No matter what they do, they can come to you and say, I have a problem, or I messed up, or I'm just not sure that what you told me is working in my life. What do I do?
Yeah. Well, and I feel like a lot of kids don't go to their parents because their parents' first reaction is to go to straight anger. And while, like, as believers, we believe there is a righteous anger. And obviously, as a parent, you're also, a lot of your anger comes from hurt and worry for your child. It's not that you're angry with your child, it's that you're so fearful of what they're doing, or you're worried about a situation that they've got themselves in, or whatever that looks like. And then when you are told about it, your first reaction is like, oh my goodness, why did you do this? This is so dumb. Like, and you don't mean to come off that way, but it just comes off that way sometimes. And I feel like a lot of parents, like especially in today's age, it's really, I feel like with anger being like the first response, or parents lecturing their kids right off the bat, their kids don't feel like their parent is a safe place to come and say, hey, you know, I am struggling with this and I want to confess this to you. One, because I know that it's wrong, or two, I feel like I'm hiding something from you and I hate that feeling. You know, or whether it's the Holy Spirit convicting them, whatever that looks like. And they're coming to, they need someone to go to, because especially when you're a teenager, preteen, thank the Lord those years are over for me. But I remember constantly being in this state of overwhelming emotion all the time. And it's so true what adults say about kids when they're like in their teenage years. They're like, oh, it won't seem like such a big deal when you are out of your teenage years, which is so true. But in that moment, it feels like a big deal.
It is a big deal.
Yeah.
And we can't trivialize that, because that is so important in a teenager's life. What's happening right now is their life.
Yeah.
And you have to realize that as a parent.
Well, and it's so weird because I laughed and I told you this when I turned 20. I was like, the day I turned 20, it literally was like my whole emotional life state, whatever, just like flipped a switch, and I quit being so overwhelmed all of the time. Was I still overwhelmed and dealing with stuff? Yes. But I could start separating my emotion from reality and say, okay, so I'm feeling like this, but I know this is actually reality. So it helped me calm myself, because I was like, oh, so I don't need to be freaking out right now. I don't need to, be responding this way, or I'm reading into someone this way and it's not them, it's me. And that's not the situation. And it's so hard, like we've said, like as a teenager, your emotions are just insane, and you're going through all this hormone regulation, your body's changing, you're going through puberty. And I think a lot of parents forget what it was like to be in that moment, and why their child feels all these raging hormones and they're just going out of control. And why are you doing this? Why do you have an attitude? Why are you going against what I'm saying? And it's so much more than them doing that. And I feel like people forget that, because they move on, they get older and things happen, and they just don't realize, like, hey, kids are going through stuff. Like, I know that you as a parent have the weight of the world on your shoulders. You are trying to make sure your kids are at school, they have food in their mouths, they have clothes, they have shoes on their feet, they have glasses, they have whatever's going on. You're trying to make sure that you're still maintaining a good relationship with your spouse, and kids aren't overrunning things, and you're still finding time to go hang out with your friends. But kids still go through stuff too. Their age doesn't invalidate what they're feeling.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that fear that you mentioned that sometimes boils over into anger because you are so afraid for what is going on in their lives, and you see where they're headed, and you can't just pick them up and turn them around and say, no, go this direction. That's not how it works. But you've got to be able to communicate, to talk to them, to make them understand, if you keep going this direction, you are not going to like where you land. And it may not seem like it right now, and you might think, oh, no, that'll never happen to me. But you really have to find a way to communicate with your children and say, hey, no, this is going to happen if you stay on this path.
Yeah, and we've had this problem before where, you know, I was, like, in the previous podcast, we talked about my past relationship. And we didn't dive a ton into it, but we did dive decently deep. And we talked about a little bit how you were really upset and afraid for me and afraid of the road you were seeing me go down. And there were several times, especially towards the end before that last breakup, that you were just so upset about the things that you would hear about him doing or how he would treat me or things you would see. And it came to a point where you started kind of lashing out at me a little bit. And it wasn't that, and I knew that you weren't angry at me, but we even had this conversation in the moment, I think, and then after, about how that kind of made me feel like it wasn't a space, like a safe space for me to come and talk to you, because I could feel that anger. And the whole reason I was coming to you was because I was so confused and I knew I needed help getting out of that situation, and I couldn't do it on my own, because obviously, like, especially in a relationship where you have so much emotion invested, like, you cannot get yourself out of that. It's just so hard. And I needed you, and I was just like, hey, like, I'm going through this, and you were just like, it just angers me what he does to you, and, you know, why are you making these choices? And it's just like, I'm coming to you. Like, I'm coming because I need help, and I need this intervention, and I need someone to kind of smack the sense into me. So when you respond in anger, I start being like, oh, well, she's mad at me, and I've displeased her, and I've done this, and I've done that. And it takes away, and I'm saying this as an adult. I was a 21-year-old at the time. I, as a 21-year-old, did not feel safe in that moment, but I was able to communicate with you. But as a teenager, that would have been 1,000 times worse.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because you were 21, because you were in that relationship so deeply, and it became so fearful to me, because it was so heart-wrenching to watch. It got to the point where I could not talk to you without crying. My heart, my soul would just cry.
Yeah.
And that came out as anger. It was just my heart fearing and my soul crying for you. And thankfully, I thank the Lord that he gave us this relationship so that we could still communicate.
Yeah.
Was it hard? Yes.
For sure.
Hey, we've had some hard conversations, but we still continued to communicate, and it worked out.
Yes,
and
it did.
we were able to come together and say, you know, we need to be there for each other. You know, I had to say to you, I am so sorry, please forgive me, because I see what you're feeling. You're feeling anger coming from me, and I am not angry with you. I am angry with someone else, but I am not angry with you.
Angry with the situation.
Yes. So, yes, that communication, though, and it's not going to be smooth all the time. It's not going to be easy, and you're going to have some hard conversations with your children if you're going to let them have that open door. And I mean, that door has to be open wide.
Yeah.
You have to be able to say to them, you can talk to me about anything, and usually at just about any time, but it has to be the right attitude.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to say, yes, I want to hear your answer. I'm asking for your help, or I'm asking a question. Does that mean you're going to turn around and do exactly what Mama thinks should be done?
No, not necessarily.
No, but take Mama's advice. Think about it, you know.
Yeah.
So it's just having that open door to say, come to me. Let me talk to you. You come and talk to me. I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to yell at you. You know, I'm not going to discipline you because I don't like what you're saying to me. No.
Yeah.
I want to be here for you. So let me be that sounding board.
Yeah, and obviously for those listening and watching actually today, that doesn't mean that you ever didn't punish us when the time, when it was needed. But you always made sure that you allowed a moment of listening to us before you responded with whatever that was. And I think that also, like, knowing you were a safe space to come to that, like, we knew sometimes it would end in punishment. But you made sure that the space that we were coming to was calm and that you were listening first. It wasn't going to be a straight into an argument or discussion. And many times you would honestly just ask questions. You wouldn't really say, well, this is what I think, or this is what you should do. You would just say, how do you feel about this? And just, other questions that you would just try to dig deeper as to what we were feeling or why we were feeling it, or what was causing our reaction.
Yes.
And that just helped so much.
Well, and then I would usually try to end those type of conversations with, what can I do to help you? How can I help you?
Yeah.
Is there something I can do? So.
Yeah, and it did help. It helped a crazy amount of a lot. And it still does, because obviously I still come to you about things, which I greatly appreciate, you always having that open door. And as an adult, I can see that it was beneficial, But kind of moving on into a different faction, because we've talked about relationships, of me being in a relationship and how you respond, but also our viewers may not know my story. I'm sure many of them don't, and our story actually, but you're my adopted mother. You're not my biological mother. I consider you my biological mother, and we joke all the time about how I look like you and you must be lying just so you don't have to claim me as yours. But me and my twin brother were both adopted at 16 months, and you never hid the fact we were adopted. And you were always honest about us being adopted, and you would say, double the trouble but twice the blessing, because we were twins. But you also would say that you chose us.
Yes.
And the beauty about this, especially as a believer now, is I can say I was twice adopted, because I was adopted into my earthly family, but I was also adopted into my heavenly, family, being a Christian. But due to John and I being adopted, did that cause any issues or put any roadblocks in your way when trying to build a strong, safe relationship with us? Because even though we were young, and a lot of people would think that 16-month babies wouldn't bring a whole lot of trauma and damage to a family being that young, there's a lot of self-conscious things, subconscious, not self-conscious, yes. Subconscious things that even as an adult are randomly popping up, that, like, my separation anxiety, I deal with separation super bad, like when it comes to people I care about, and that's like my biggest fear, is losing people I care about because of that separation I had as a child. But, kind of talking about that, were there roadblocks? Like, did it cause roadblocks?
Absolutely. First of all, like you said, that separation, you had such separation anxiety, because all of a sudden one day you didn't have your biological mother anymore. Yeah. You didn't even call her mommy or mom or whatever. It was, you called her by her name, but still, she was your biological mother. She was the one you were attached to when you were born. She was your lifeline.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden one day you didn't have that lifeline. Whether it was good or not is not the point. It's the fact that all of a sudden your world just changed. And so there was the separation, and there was the trust.
Yeah.
And trust is so, so, so important in any relationship. But that it took a long time to actually, even at that age, to actually make you understand that I was going to do what I said I was going to do.
Yeah.
And I was going to love you no matter what you did. I would love you no matter what you said to me, you know, and just to see you and John going through that struggle of the separation and the trust issues was very, very heartbreaking. But I knew that the only way I could get through was to just keep praying and saying, Lord, just keep showing me how I can show them that I love them. They're important to me, and I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah. Well, and that separation, like, anxiety came out as a child, like as a baby, not long after you adopted us, because you were the first person that I ran to, you know, after you kind of walked into our lives. Like, quite literally, I ran to you.
Yes.
And from that moment, I think, and I honestly think God put it in my heart and in my mind as a child to know that you were going to be my mother. And in a way, it was like, okay, so this is the person I cling to. This is the person who's not going to leave me. But at the same time, it was that fear of being left again. And I think that's why, as an infant, I never let anyone hold me other than you. Yes. I was very, like, stubborn. And I was also very protective of John, because I was like, no one's going to take him from me. No one's going to treat him badly.
Yes.
And I think it didn't take very long for me to trust you with him. And then I kind of just went and did my own thing. But I think that, especially, like, still when it came to you, like, as a young child, as a preteen, and even into my teenage years, like, anytime you had to leave on a trip or something, didn't matter, you know, what it was, and unfortunately you couldn't take me, or something happened and you just had to go on this trip last minute, I just didn't react well. And it was just always a struggle, and it still is a struggle for me. Thank the Lord for FaceTime. But it makes it was really hard. It was really hard as a child. And I think the reason that it was, like, it got easier was because you always made sure we had that open door. You allowed me to be attached to you, but you still encouraged my independence. And
Absolutely.
You encouraged me stepping out there and learning by myself, but you never pushed me away. It was always I'm going to be here if you fall or if you want to come back. But I think it's wise for you to step forward a little bit, and whatever that is, going out with your friends for an evening, or, you know, living in a house by myself, or whatever, going to college. That was a doozy.
It's like, spread your wings, and you always have a home to come back to.
Yeah.
But don't be afraid to spread your wings a little bit. You know, the nest is always here, but learn to use your wings.
Yeah, but I think just the communication, you allowing us to be vulnerable with you, meant a lot. And it still does mean a crazy amount of a lot. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up with one more question. And it was, what advice would you give to other parents or even children wanting to have a better relationship with their child or their parent?
Whether you're a parent, a child, or a teenager, just don't be afraid to go to your family and talk to them. Just, you know, is it going to be a hard conversation? Yes, especially in the beginning. But the more you communicate, the easier it becomes. And then you end up with a relationship like what we have, to where no matter what happens, I know that you are not afraid to come to me. And I know that no matter what life deals to you, you're going to talk to me about it, maybe not right in the moment.
Yeah.
That's, you know, and that's okay. But I do know that you're going to come to me, and I'm going to be able to pray with you and pray for you and pray about it, and know that we can get through it together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might not be able to physically do anything to help you, but I can pray, and God can show us how to get through it together. And that open communication, I mean, I would just say, if you're a teenager and you haven't talked to your parents in a long time, probably deep down in your soul you really want to. Just find the time. Maybe, you know, put down that phone, that tablet, you know, walk away from that show you watch every night or every week, and just go say, hey, Mom, I just want to tell you something, or can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Start with a simple question and just start talking. You don't have to get into deep conversation right then and there, but start somewhere. Mamas, go to your children and say, hey, what kind of day did you have today? Hey, what did you learn about today?
Exactly.
There was never a Sunday that we went home that I did not ask you and John, together and then individually, what'd you learn about in church?
Yeah.
What'd it mean to you? What do you remember?
Yeah, and you started with the little things. And I think that's what helped us know to come to you with the big things as well. Because when you gave an attentive ear about the stupidest things, like, hey, Mama, my shopping haul for today. You still do that. Or, hey, what do you think of the living room furniture being in this direction? What do you think about me taking this job? What do you think about me taking this course in school? What do you think about me going to school? What do you think about X, Y, Z? Does not matter. But when you started with the little stuff, you know, it meant a lot. And parents, for those of you who are listening, if you're not providing a safe space for your child is going somewhere else. I really want you to hear that, because I'm not a child anymore, but speaking from a child's perspective, having been there, if your child does not feel safe coming to you to have that conversation, they're going to their friends, or they're going to someone online, or they're going to whatever. And I have to beseech you to open that door to have that relationship with your child, because you do not know what advice they are getting. You don't know if it's God honoring. You don't know if it's going to be something stupid, because I have countless things I can tell you about where some kid had a dumb idea and they went to their friends about it, and their peers said, oh yeah, that would be funny. And they went and did it. And it ended up wrecking that child's entire life.
Yes.
And just, I can't stress it enough. Please be that safe space for your child, because your child is going to feel the most comfortable with you if you provide that safe space, but you also know what advice they're going to be getting.
And you don't know how vulnerable they are out there with the people that they're going to for advice.
Exactly.
That just opens up so many doors.
And especially in a day of digital everything. Oh my goodness, you have no clue what your child, like who your child is talking to online. You may think it's their friend, but it could be a 40-year-old man or whatever. Like, it's so important that parents open that door for their child to have a safe space to come to them, but also for a child to be honest and open with their parent. It's very beautiful.
It is. And you have to start somewhere. So please, Mama, go talk to your children. Children, teenagers, go talk to your mom. Go talk to your dad.
Yeah.
Just open those doors of communication. Just start with a question, and you know, maybe tomorrow night you'll talk about something else just a little bit more each day, until you can finally feel comfortable and say, hey, you know, I've had this on my mind for a long time, and I really want to hear what you think about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, just be there for them. Don't feel like you have to judge everything they do. Don't feel like you have to discipline every time you hear that they have done something or said something or thought something that you don't agree with.
Yeah.
Help to guide them out of it, around it. Take them to the Lord. Pray with them. Pray for them.
Yeah.
Just love them.
That's the biggest thing. Biggest thing I can do. Well, that's all the time we have for today, but thank you so much for joining us and for being willing to share your experience. I mean, our experience, I'll say that again, but it just means so much. And it's so wonderful getting to see how God works. And I'm extremely grateful that He made you my mama, and that you had the wisdom to say, I'm going to be a safe space for my children, because that has done so much in my life. And now you're my best friend.
Well, thank you for having me, but most of all, thank the Lord that He gave me the opportunity to be that parent, to understand the wisdom that He has given me, and just to help me to refine it over the years.
Yes.
And thank you so much for just being a voice out here for these children and teenagers that just need to be heard.
Yeah, I feel like we all need a voice somehow. Also, a big thank you to those of you watching the podcast today. I hope you were encouraged and will join us next time as you fearlessly pursue your calling.